In this video, what we're going to go ahead and do is take a look at what I think is going to be kind of just the recipe for success for Mac Jones specifically, what this team needs to do to really give us the best chance of winning with Mac Jones as the quarterback, which is apparently going to be the case, evidently. But first things first, I wanted to just go ahead and break this down. So before I get into it, be sure to smash the like button, leave a comment down below, and subscribe for the best Patriots content on YouTube. We're going to be taking a look here at the Pro Football Focus grades for both Jacoby Brissett in his first preseason, and then Jimmy Garoppolo in his first preseason, and then we're going to be taking an overview look at Mac Jones' first preseason and just compare, because those are some of the best rookie quarterbacks we've had for the Patriots in the past, even 10 or almost 20 years, basically outside of Tom Brady. Those are the best two that we've had. And Jimmy Garoppolo is widely regarded as being the future starter for the Patriots. And I think if Tom Brady would have retired in like 2017, 2018, like a normal quarterback does, in their upper 30s, he's not a normal quarterback, so he didn't. Jimmy Garoppolo would have been the starter for the Patriots, and I think it would have gone better than it has for him for the 49ers. Obviously, anytime we saw Jimmy Garoppolo play for the Patriots, it generally went pretty well. I think injury is the only thing that really held him back, and even his first year for the 49ers was really good. Jacoby Brissett went on to have success for the Colts, a moderate amount of success. He was a third-round pick, by the way. Jimmy Garoppolo was a second-round pick, and Mac Jones is a first-round pick. All three are from the first three early rounds, but Mac Jones is obviously the highest ceiling player out of all three of these. I think Jimmy Garoppolo also had a very high ceiling as a second-round pick. You kind of look at a second-round quarterback as more of a developmental, possibly starter. First-round pick should be a starter one day. Obviously, you're not spending a first-round pick on a player that's never going to start. Third round, they might never be a starter. They might be a solid backup, but they could be a starter technically. So let's just start out with Jacoby Brissett here. His first season was 2016, which is funny because that's the year he actually had to play in the regular season because of the Deflategate suspension for Tom Brady, which actually went really well. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Let's just break his first preseason down game by game. Game 1 wasn't too hot. 43.5 passing grade for him according to Pro Football Focus. Obviously leaves a little bit more to be desired. 43 is definitely in that bad range. 50s is kind of average. 70s is good. 80s is very good. And then 90s is your elite. That's how I look at it, at least. 43.5 is a bad game. So his first preseason game came down as a pretty bad game. Week 2, though, he rebounded with his best preseason game, 91.2, which is elite. So he came out and just balled in his second preseason game there. Obviously, they had 4 preseason games back then, so there was a little bit more of a sample size than we get with Mac Jones. But I think 3 is still a decent sample size as well. Week 3, by the way, 78.1, so a really good game. So you're on, again, 70s is good, 80s is really good, so this was a good, bordering on really good game for him in Week 3, looking promising by that point. But then Week 4, he comes in with a 61.8, which is what I would basically say is above average, but not necessarily good either. Near average, slightly above average, something like that for that final game. Overall, Pro Football Focus gave his overall 4-game preseason a 72.7, which is going to come in at a good rating. So he had a good preseason overall, Jacoby Brissett did. Let's talk about Jimmy Garoppolo here. His first preseason was 2014, so 2 years before Jacoby Brissett. I can't believe we had Jacoby Brissett, Jimmy Garoppolo, and Tom Brady on the same roster, by the way. Talk about, talent and just future prospect. Overall, if Tom Brady was a little bit older in, let's say, 2016, we would have been in really good shape for the future of the Patriots quarterback group. I think between Jimmy Garoppolo or Jacoby Brissett, one of them would have found great success with us. Obviously, they went to different systems and it didn't work out as well, but I ultimately think they had high potential and would have done well with us. Let me know if you agree with that, by the way. But here's Jimmy Garoppolo. We're just going to do the same thing here. Again, 2014. Week 1, 82.1, which is, again, really good. So he started out things really good. And then Week 2, by the way, before I get into Week 2, actually, Week 1 was versus the Redskins. And what's interesting is Mac Jones' first game was versus the Washington football team, which we all know is the same team, different name. So I found that pretty interesting. Week 2, though, 74.7, so that's good, not quite as good as week 1. And then week 3 was more like average at a 62.9, and then week 4 was almost below average with a 59.1. The one thing I noticed about this as I was figuring this all out is it's descending. You can see it just gets worse and worse each week, almost by 10. The only time it didn't really drop that bad was from week 3 to week 4, but it was a solid, 4 4 points on the grade drop there, so not too good. But overall, his preseason 71.1, which is good. That's good. I mean, so both of these guys, Jacoby Brissett had the better preseason for his first preseason, but both of these guys had really good preseason. So I wonder how Mac Jones is going to compare to this, because these guys, we all knew that these guys had a lot of promise when we drafted both of them. And a lot of the people, even some of the people that doubt Mac Jones, thought Jimmy Garoppolo was the future. There was no reason to think he wasn't the future at the time, because you can't foresee Tom Brady playing until he's like 45 or 50, back when he's like 36 and 38. You kind of suspect that, he might retire, here in the next few years. That was the thought process back then, obviously. But that didn't happen. But everybody thought Jimmy Garoppolo would end up being the starter. When we traded him, it was a little bit shocking, but it all kind of worked out. Let's take a look at Mac Jones, though. 15th overall pick. Pro Football Focus grades for the preseason of 2021. Again, we only had 3 games this preseason, and I'm pretty sure every future preseason now as well, which I kind of like that system more, actually. But week 1, 82, very similar to Jimmy Garoppolo's 82.1 versus the Washington football team. That's why I found it so interesting. It's within a 0.1 difference there versus the same team. Obviously, this year's Washington football team is a whole lot better than the 2014 Redskins. But definitely interesting there. Week 2, though, he comes out definitely not descending like Jimmy Garoppolo did. 93.2, which is better than Jacoby Brissett's week 2 91.2 rating. And then week 3 comes out with a 77.1, and a lot of people were like, oh, only a 77.1. I mean, that's better than most of the games the other guys had, and that's Mac Jones' worst preseason game. So again, Jacoby Brissett had a 72.7 overall rating in that preseason. Jimmy Garoppolo had a 71.1 rating in his preseason. Very promising rookie prospect. We all thought he would end up being the starter. Mac Jones had a 92.2 passing grade on the entire preseason this year. So the difference between these guys that we all thought were very promising and Mac Jones, who we mostly all think is very promising, is night and day. He is leagues ahead of where Jimmy Garoppolo and Jacoby Brissett were in their rookie seasons. And the reason I think that's so important, and the main point I wanted to talk about, I kind of just threw Jimmy Garoppolo in there, but it's not as kind of relatable to this situation. But Jacoby Brissett, because of the Deflategate suspension, and then Jimmy Garoppolo ended up getting injured, Jacoby Brissett was our third quarterback, and he had to come in and play in his rookie season. And I'm pretty sure, if I'm correct, he played in 3 games. Now, in these 3 games, the most important thing here is that he threw for 400 yards. So he averaged over 100 yards per game. Also, another important thing to note is that, according to Pro Football Focus, during those 4 games where Tom Brady was suspended, our running game was not that good. Most games, our running backs were averaging in the 70s ratings. I think there was one game where we had one of those guys rank in the 80s, which is really good. But 70s is just kind of good. And I think we can get similar play this year from the running game, because it was 5 years ago, but I think this offensive line is better than it was then. I think this running back group as a whole has more potential than that one did. We had LeGarrette Blount, James White, Dion Lewis back then. Now we have Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, J.J. Taylor, and still James White. So you tell me what you think, but I think we have more potential at the running back group. I think we also have a better offensive line. We surely have better tight ends as a whole, because we did have Gronkowski, but now we have 2 tight ends. So I think that's a little bit more valuable to the running game. The wide receivers are not as good, so that's the one thing that's definitely not as good, and quarterback is definitely not as good. But I think we can rely more heavily on the running game than we were able to with the Jacoby Brissett experiment in 2016. But Jacoby Brissett was able to get 400 yards even, no interceptions. That's another huge thing. He didn't make those mistakes. No interceptions. That's also huge. If we can get something similar to that with Mac Jones, with an awesome running game and a really good defense, which I also think is better than 2016, because if you remember, let me just give you guys a little bit of a flashback. During the 2016 and 2017 seasons, our defense was cringeworthy. If I remember, like we had stars, we had Dante Hightower still back then. That was the Malcolm Butler days. And obviously we had Devin McCourty, Patrick Chung. So we had some stars, but the problem is we traded away Jamie Collins within the first few games. And it just like I think Logan Ryan was the main problem, our second cornerback. I just remember him getting beat up on constantly. It was this like grueling bend don't break defense, but like not a very good one. So we would still break sometimes. But it was like emphasis on the bend because we were giving up first downs left and right. Nothing like how these defenses have been the past 3 or 4 seasons. And again, it's only improved. We know this season it will only be improved on paper. That is, we might have a different play style. It might not be exactly the same, but I think it's improved. I think overall, Mac Jones should have an easier situation than Jacoby Brissett should have. That's basically what I just spent 5 minutes trying to explain. Mac Jones should have an easier time than Jacoby Brissett did based on the team around him. And also, it's evident he's a much better passer than Jacoby Brissett was. So those two things combined leads me to believe that they're going to do something similar to what they did with Jacoby Brissett. Try to not make mistakes. I don't really care if he gets touchdowns, I think if Mac Jones throws around 20 touchdowns this season, that would be really good because that's near 2 touchdowns a game, and we can expect the running backs to get 1 or 2 touchdowns a game as well with how good this running game should be. I mean, all of a sudden you're looking at an average of 20 to 30 points. That should be enough to win games, especially in the upper 20s or 30s, because of the fact that obviously the defense, we're expecting them to probably average. I mean, if they're really good, it could be in the lower teens, but I think they should average giving up, 15 to 20 points a game. So at 21 to 30 points a game on the offense, that should be enough to win a majority of the games, which is pretty much all we need this season to see a massive improvement. If we can win, 8, 9, 10 games, I think everybody would be pretty satisfied with that, especially the 9 or 10. But I think they could even push 11 or 12 wins if they really focus on a really good bend don't break defense, not giving up 20 to 30 points a game. But if they're giving up under 20 points a game, we should win a significant amount of our games. Because with the run game and with Mac Jones maybe throwing 1 or 2 touchdowns a game, but the running backs getting 1 or 2 touchdowns a game, those things combined, it's going to lead to success if we can really be successful in the running game and at defense and really give Mac Jones a situation where there is no mistakes to be made. The Patriots, all of us pretty much know this at this point, but their whole thing under Bill Belichick has been, if you make the least amount of mistakes out of the 2 teams playing, you're playing your opponent. If you make less mistakes than them, you're probably going to win. And it holds true time and time again. So if Mac Jones doesn't throw interceptions, if he doesn't fumble, which he has shown some symptoms of having fumbling issues a little bit during our training camp and everything, which hopefully that's been addressed. But as long as they can limit the interceptions and just get a solid amount of yards so that we can get in position to run the ball in, maybe get a couple touchdowns, 1 or 2 touchdowns a game, I don't mind that. That's going to win us some games. I think a lot of people are going to be like, Mac Jones isn't good. He only threw, 20 touchdowns this season. He only threw, I don't even know how many yards it would be, but whatever. But as long as there's not a ton of interceptions, that's what's going to win us games, in my opinion. So that's the recipe for success with Mac Jones here. Strong run game, strong defense, a stronger run game than they gave Jacoby Brissett, but play similar to how they played back in 2016 when they had to bring those other quarterbacks in. I think that's the best reference for us to use and best piece of information on how we can expect Mac Jones to perform. And it's something between, it's going to be something like what Jacoby Brissett and also what Jimmy Garoppolo was able to bring in that 2016 season, but for an entire season. So we're just going to have to wait and see how it goes. I think they're going to have a similar play style and play plan. I'm very excited to see how it goes, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you agree with kind of my analysis here from the blast from the past back in 2016? Let me know what your thoughts are. Be sure to subscribe for the best Patriots content on YouTube, guys. We just crossed over 10,000 subscribers. I'm so thankful for that. But now is the road to 15,000, which I think is the next milestone. And I'm so excited to get there. Obviously, we're on pace to get there. Probably midway through the season. So I'm so excited for that as more and more people continue to enjoy our videos. It's just so awesome to see us building this community. Be sure to leave a comment down below because that helps as well. And smash the like button. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next video.